You have probably pulled up behind a dump truck at a red light and noticed something strange. One of the wheels is not touching the ground. It is just hanging there, tire and all, suspended a few inches above the asphalt, while every other wheel spins. Maybe you thought the truck was broken. Maybe you figured it was a design flaw nobody ever fixed. And you have probably seen it on 100 other trucks too. Garbage trucks, concrete mixers, heavy tankers, even some buses. One wheel, just dangling there like it forgot to do its job. So why is it there at all? Why build an entire wheel, buy a tire, bolt it to an axle, and then lift the whole assembly off the road? The answer is not a glitch. It is a very specific piece of federal law being obeyed in real time, right in front of you, every single day you drive. But the real reason goes a lot deeper than staying legal. Here is the thing most people miss. That floating wheel is not there to drive the truck. It is there to protect a bridge you are about to cross on your way home. And the math behind it is strange enough that it took a disaster in 1967 that killed 46 people and 7 years of Congress to finally write it down. The answer has 4 parts. Most people only ever hear the first one. But let us start with what everyone gets wrong. The obvious answer, the one any mechanic will give you first, is money. Commercial truck tires are not cheap. A single heavy-duty tire for a Class 8 truck runs anywhere from $400 to $700 retail, sometimes higher for specialty applications. A lift axle does not carry just one tire. Most of them carry 4, 2 on each side, dual-mounted, so every single auxiliary axle bolted onto the frame represents roughly $2,000 to $2,800 in rubber alone. Multiply that across a fleet of 200 dump trucks, and the tire bill starts adding up fast. But that is the easy part. The harder part is what those rolling tires actually do to a fleet's operating budget every single day. A commercial tire on a heavily loaded dump truck wears out in roughly 80,000 to 120,000 miles, depending on road conditions and how the truck is loaded. Every mile those tires are in contact with the asphalt is a mile they are slowly grinding themselves into retirement. And here is the problem. If a truck is running empty, which happens constantly on the return leg of a job, those extra tires are wearing out for no reason at all. They are not supporting any meaningful load. They are just along for the ride, chewing through tread, costing the fleet money every revolution. Therefore, if you can physically lift those wheels off the ground when the truck does not need them, you instantly stop the wear. The clock stops. The tires effectively hibernate. And the fuel economy math runs in the same direction. Tires have rolling resistance, and rolling resistance costs fuel. A truck running 8 axles on the ground when 4 would do is literally dragging extra friction down the road. Industry studies have found real, measurable improvements in miles per gallon when lift axles are used correctly on empty runs. But here's what that explanation misses. The cost argument is real, but it's secondary. A fleet could save tires a dozen other ways. They could buy cheaper tires. They could run smaller trucks. They could just accept tire wear as the cost of doing business, the way every other industry accepts inventory depreciation. None of that explains why a brand new dump truck rolls off the factory floor with an axle already engineered to lift. It doesn't explain why every concrete mixer in North America is built this way. It doesn't explain why the entire industry, across every fleet in every state, treats this as non-negotiable standard practice. The tire savings are a bonus. They are not the reason. The real reason is something almost nobody outside of trucking ever talks about, and it involves a 4-variable equation that Congress signed into law in 1974 and started enforcing in 1975. The real reason lift axles exist is a piece of federal regulation called the Federal Bridge Formula, written into the Federal Aid Highway Act amendments of 1974 and enforced starting January of 1975. The name is not a metaphor. It is literally a formula you can read in the Code of Federal Regulations. The formula reads, W equals 500 times L times N divided by the quantity N minus 1 plus 12 times N plus 36. W is the maximum legal gross weight. L is the distance in feet between the first and last axles of any group. N is the number of axles in that group. That one equation, buried in federal law, is the reason the wheels on your local concrete mixer lift and lower. The formula mathematically rewards trucks that spread their weight across more axles. On the interstate system, the absolute ceiling for a truck is 80,000 pounds gross vehicle weight. That's the big number everyone knows. But the bridge formula stacks a second layer on top of it. A single axle can legally carry 20,000 pounds. A tandem pair can carry 34,000. Anything above that, and you are over the legal axle weight, even if you are under the 80,000 pound total. So the only way to carry more weight legally on a single truck is to add more axles, spaced far enough apart to satisfy the formula. So lift axles exist. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. When a dump truck is carrying 60,000 pounds of gravel out of a quarry, every axle on that frame is mathematically necessary to stay legal. Lift the tag axle, and suddenly the truck is overweight on its drive axles and illegal on every federal highway in the country. But when that same truck dumps its load and rolls back empty, every one of those auxiliary axles is legally unnecessary. They are just grinding tread for no reason. So the engineers did the obvious thing. They made the extra axles optional. Raise them when the truck does not need the weight rating, lower them when it does. One truck, two legal configurations, both chosen in real time by a driver flipping a switch in the cab. And this connects to something sitting in your kitchen right now. We will get to that. The numbers show how seriously the federal government takes this. Drive one axle too heavy across a weigh station, and the fine can run into thousands of dollars per violation. In some states, repeat offenders can have their trucks impounded on the spot. Bridge formula enforcement is aggressive because the stakes are not abstract. A truck that violates the formula is not just breaking a rule on paper. It is concentrating more tonnage onto a single square foot of a bridge deck than that bridge was designed to absorb. And the history of what happens when that math goes wrong is the part that changes everything about how you will look at this. On December 15, 1967, at roughly 5 o'clock in the evening during rush hour, the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed into the Ohio River without warning. 46 people died. 31 vehicles went down with the structure. The bridge had been built in 1928. By 1967, it was carrying loads its original designers had never imagined, because the traffic of the late 1920s looked nothing like the traffic of the late 1960s. Trucks were heavier, traffic was denser. The infrastructure from the Coolidge era had never been systematically re-inspected. A single eye-bar in the suspension chain had a microscopic crack that had been silently growing for decades. The bridge could not handle one more overloaded evening, and it did not. Silver Bridge is the disaster most people point to, but it was not the only warning Congress was getting. The decade leading into 1975 produced a steady drumbeat of bridge failures, emergency weight restrictions, and rising federal concern that American highway infrastructure was being quietly eaten alive by trucks that were legally too heavy in the wrong configuration. Therefore, in the wake of Silver Bridge, Congress passed the National Bridge Inspection Standards in 1968 and began looking seriously at how trucks distributed their weight across their axles. It took another 7 years of negotiation between federal regulators, state transportation departments, and the trucking industry to produce the formula that governs lift axles today. The problem the formula solves is deeply counterintuitive. Most people assume a bridge cares about total weight. It doesn't. It cares about weight per linear foot of its deck. A 40,000-pound truck on 2 axles is punishing to a bridge. The same 40,000 pounds spread across 5 axles is almost gentle. Steel and concrete spans are engineered to handle distributed loads, not concentrated ones. A single overweight axle is essentially trying to punch a hole through the roadway above the support beam. Therefore, the federal formula rewards distribution mathematically. More axles, spaced further apart, carrying less per axle, equals more legal gross weight. That's the deal Congress made with the industry. But here's the genuinely absurd part. Before lift axles became standard, fleets dealt with the weight limits in some bizarre ways. Drivers carried sandbags in the cab to manually shift weight forward or back. Operators routed loaded trucks over back roads and state highways that had different rules than the interstate, adding hours to every trip. Some companies simply ran overweight on purpose and paid the fines as a cost of doing business, which meant the fines were effectively a tax on accelerated bridge damage. The lift axle was the clean engineering solution to a messy operational problem. Put the extra axle on the truck. Use it when you need the legal weight. Lift it when you don't. Therefore, the trucks you see every day on the road are physically shaped by a bridge that collapsed in 1967 and a formula that Congress wrote 7 years later. This is where you realize the pattern has been in front of you your entire life. That garbage truck that rumbled past your house this morning. At least one of its axles was lifted on the way to the route, lowered during pickup as the hopper filled, and lifted again on the way back to the transfer station. That concrete mixer you saw parked at a construction site down the street is the same system. An empty drum means the axle is lifted. A full drum means the axle is lowered. Every delivery of ready-mix concrete in the United States runs on this exact mechanical logic, whether the driver consciously thinks about it or not. The dump trucks working that quarry road you drove past on the way to the lake last summer have lift axles on every single one of them. The fuel tankers that deliver gasoline to your local gas station have lift axles. The heavy haulers that move construction equipment on flatbed trailers have lift axles, sometimes 4 or 5 of them stacked in a row behind the cab. The luxury motor coaches on the highway and some school buses operate on similar tag axle principles, lifted when the vehicle is lightly loaded, lowered when it is full of passengers. Now for the part that lands closer to home. Every bridge on your daily commute, every overpass you drive under, every county road span, every interstate viaduct, every one of those structures is standing partly because trucks above a certain weight class have been legally required since 1975 to distribute their load across enough axles to satisfy the formula. That includes the bridges you trust without thinking about them, the one over the creek near your neighborhood, the one you cross every morning on the way to work, the one you drove over on your last road trip and never gave a second thought to. And when that math fails, the consequences are not theoretical. On August 1st, 2007, at 6:05 in the evening during rush hour, the Interstate 35 West Bridge in Minneapolis collapsed into the Mississippi River. 13 people died. The investigation pointed to a design flaw in the gusset plates combined with decades of cumulative loading, including construction equipment staged on the deck at the time. The bridge formula exists precisely because the alternative, bridges giving up silently after decades of overload, is something America has already lived through more than once. So here is where you actually land. You pulled up behind that dump truck at the red light, thinking you were looking at a broken wheel, a design flaw, or a lazy mechanic who never got around to fixing something obvious. But what you were actually looking at was a 1975 federal regulation written in the wake of 46 deaths on a West Virginia bridge, a 4-variable equation with an 80,000-pound ceiling on every interstate in America, the cumulative weight of every heavy vehicle in the country, the entire logic of how bridges survive the 21st century, and a driver quietly flipping a switch in a cab to legally reshape the truck underneath him in real time, axle by axle, mile by mile. That wheel was not broken. It was obeying the law, and the law existed because a bridge did not. You are not just looking at a garbage truck or a concrete mixer. You are looking at the physical shape of infrastructure policy. Every span you drive over this week is standing partly because that wheel came up. And if you think the truck in front of you is hiding strange engineering, wait until we get into why most of the highway bridges in the United States were technically designed for a country that stopped existing in 1956.